Welcome to Dataverse by Nino Pohl. I'm so glad you're joining us today. This is episode number 30, and today we are looking at building a scalable analytics ecosystem for B2B manufacturing.
Yeah, it's a really complex but super rewarding topic.
It really is. So to kick us off, just imagine trying to steer a massive global enterprise.
Yeah,
You're at the helm, but your compass, it will only work some of the time.
right.
And honestly, worse than that, you're never entirely sure when it's pointing true north and when it's just outright lying to you.
That's a terrifying position to be in.
Exactly. I mean, making strategic decisions based on data you don't actually trust, it isn't just an inconvenience. It is a massive strategic liability.
Yeah, it's basically the equivalent of flying blind, but with this false confidence that you actually have instruments guiding you,
Oh, totally.
which is arguably way more dangerous than having no instruments at all because you're making these bold, high-stakes moves based on a mirage.
Right? So welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to explore a fascinating case study where Nino Pohl actually helped a global agricultural and industrial equipment manufacturer completely rebuild their broken web analytics from the ground up,
Ground up.
moving away from those distorted, untrustworthy metrics and into absolute certainty.
And on paper, their original setup probably looked pretty standard to a lot of IT departments, which
Yeah.
is really what makes this such a compelling teardown.
Definitely. But before we get into the architectural brilliance of what they built, I want to challenge the premise here a little bit.
Yeah.
We're talking about a B2B manufacturer selling massive industrial equipment, right? Combine
It's
harvesters.
big, heavy machinery.
Yeah. And they sell through an international network of authorized dealers. You can't exactly click add to cart and buy a tractor on their website.
Oh, definitely not.
So why do they even care this much about web analytics?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like they are a direct-to-consumer shoe brand optimizing a checkout page.
Well, that's a vital distinction to make right away. In the B2B manufacturing world, the website isn't really a transactional digital storefront. It's an intensive research and discovery channel.
Okay, a discovery channel.
Yeah. The sales cycles are incredibly long, sometimes spanning months or honestly even years. Distributors, procurement officers, end buyers, they are on that site downloading heavy technical specs,
Right.
reading compatibility playbooks, and comparing product lines long before they ever pick up a phone to actually call a dealer.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Mm.
The website is essentially doing the heavy lifting of educating and qualifying the buyer.
Precisely. If you lose visibility into that digital journey, you have basically no idea what your prospects actually care about, or which of your marketing efforts are driving real pipeline value.
Wow, okay.
You are completely disconnected from the top of your own sales funnel.
So the stakes are actually huge. And to track this journey, they were relying on Google Analytics 4, or GA4 as most people call it. But the underlying issue that kind of sparked this entire project was that the data they were looking at on their dashboards was heavily sampled.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is the mechanics of GA4's native reporting and why sampling even exists in the first place.
Right.
When you are a massive global enterprise with millions of web interactions, every click, every scroll, page load, download processing, every single individual interaction in real time requires an enormous amount of computational power.
And server cost.
Exactly,
Yeah.
huge server cost. Google wants to keep their platform fast and responsive for users running day-to-day reports. So to save compute resources on massive data sets, GA4 applies data sampling.
So instead of counting every single user, it just looks at a subset and guesses the rest.
Essentially, yes. It looks at a percentage of your traffic, say 10 or 20%, and then uses an algorithm to mathematically extrapolate what the total picture probably looks like. It is an
Wow.
educated estimate.
See, I've heard people compare that to watching a blurry movie or, missing frames of a film, but that doesn't quite capture the danger of it.
No, it doesn't.
I mean, relying on sample data is like trying to review a movie when you're only allowed to watch every 10th frame. You might get the general vibe of the film, but you are absolutely missing the plot. Or, actually, sampling is more like a pollster standing outside a massive football stadium, asking 5 random people if they enjoyed the halftime show, and then assuming all 80,000 people inside feel exactly the same way.
Right.
If those 5 people happen to be waiting in line for the bathroom during the show, your entire data set is completely warped.
That is a much more accurate way to visualize the risk, and it really highlights why sampling is so uniquely devastating for a B2B manufacturer.
Because the numbers are smaller.
Exactly. If that sampling algorithm decides to smooth out an anomaly, it might accidentally erase a highly engaged distributor who spent 45 minutes reading your technical specifications. In B2B, the volume of highly qualified prospects is much smaller than a consumer brand, but the value of each prospect is exponentially higher.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, losing even a few of those data points to algorithmic smoothing completely distorts your understanding of buyer intent.
Which perfectly explains the persistent confusion mentioned in the case study. Stakeholders were trying to make multi-million-dollar decisions about marketing spend and website structure, but they were just arguing in circles.
It's just the numbers kept changing.
Exactly. The user counts, the session behaviors, the engagement trends, they were constantly shifting depending on how the data was sampled that day. They were trying to build a strategy on numbers that weren't even real.
And you cannot optimize what you cannot accurately measure.
Right. So if the native dashboard is just this extrapolated guess, the logical next step for any data team is to bypass the dashboard entirely. You just export the raw data to see every single person in the stadium.
Right.
And GA4 allows you to export your raw, unsampled data directly into Google BigQuery, which is Google's enterprise data warehouse.
On the surface, that sounds like the perfect silver bullet, right? You establish a data lake, and it gets populated with every single interaction in its raw, unfiltered state. The stadium is full, and you have a record of everyone.
But wait, so they had this massive reservoir of raw data sitting in BigQuery, but they literally couldn't drink from it without building a specialized water treatment plant first?
That's a great way to put it.
Why couldn't they just point a business intelligence tool at it and start building charts? It's just a database, isn't it?
Not exactly. The massive roadblock they hit is something called a highly nested event-level schema.
Okay, let's unpack that. What does nested actually mean in this context? Because I know data can take a lot of different shapes.
Think about how a traditional relational database table works. You have a neat row for a user and separate columns for their location, the device they used, and the page they visited.
Like an Excel spreadsheet.
Basically, yeah. It is flat, highly structured, and incredibly easy to read. But GA4 doesn't export data like that. It exports data in a format akin to JSON, where a single user interaction is stored as an array of event parameters. It's data folded inside of data.
Like a Russian nesting doll.
Yes, exactly. You might have one single row for an event called page view, but nested inside that page view doll are a dozen smaller dolls. The page URL, the timestamp, the user's IP address, the scroll depth, the referral source.
And standard SQL queries the language analysts use to talk to databases, they don't know how to easily open those dolls.
They absolutely hate it. You cannot easily run a standard query against nested arrays to get quick answers. And you certainly cannot plug that raw, folded-up BigQuery data into a visualization platform like Power BI or Tableau and expect it to generate a readable chart.
The tool just gets confused.
The BI tool just sees a clump of incomprehensible arrays. It expects clean columns, and instead, it gets a maze.
So they technically owned all their unsampled data, but it was analytically inaccessible. It's like having a vault full of gold ore, but you don't have a furnace to melt it down into coins.
That is the exact situation they were in. The data was there, but it was entirely useless for business operations without a massive engineering effort to flatten it out.
Which brings us to the actual architectural solution, right?
Yes.
Needlepole didn't just write a messy one-off script to force this BigQuery data into a dashboard. They built a massive multi-layered pipeline using Snowflake.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, why Snowflake? If the data is already sitting in Google BigQuery, why incur the effort of moving it to a completely different data warehouse platform?
That's a crucial architectural decision that speaks to the scale of this project. While BigQuery is fantastic as a massive, scalable receiving dock like a data lake, Snowflake excels at what we call the transformation layer. Snowflake separates its computing power from its data storage. This means you can run incredibly heavy, complex data transformations without slowing down the actual storage layer or racking up insane query costs. It gives you incredible agility when you need to manipulate massive data sets.
Okay, so BigQuery acts as the giant funnel catching everything from GA4, and Snowflake acts as the heavy-duty refinery.
Precisely. And within Snowflake, Needlepole engineered a 3-layer architecture. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this layered approach is a foundational best practice in modern data engineering. They built a bronze layer, a silver layer, and a gold layer.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I've seen this pattern pop up in a few of our deep dives.
Yeah.
Walk us through how a piece of nested data actually travels through these 3 layers.
So the bronze layer is your raw data. It's essentially an exact, immutable copy of what came out of BigQuery. You keep it in its original state, so you always have an untampered historical record.
Makes sense.
If something breaks downstream or if a business rule changes in the future, you can always go back to the bronze layer to see the original evidence.
So we take the raw, unopened nesting dolls and put them in the bronze room for safekeeping.
Yes. Then, custom ETL pipelines, which stands for extract, transform, load, move that data into the silver layer. This is where Ninopol engineered the solution to the nested nightmare. In the silver layer, the data undergoes normalization.
And normalization means what exactly in this specific pipeline?
It means they wrote complex logic to systematically open those nesting dolls at scale. They extracted the location data, the user ID, and the time spent from those messy arrays and placed them into their own dedicated cross-reference tables. They also cleaned up formatting issues, filtered out bot traffic, and standardized column names. So now instead of a clump of unreadable data, you have clean relational tables.
Got it. So if the silver layer is clean and flat, what is left for the gold layer to do?
The gold layer applies the business logic. The silver layer is clean, but it's still millions and millions of individual event rows. The gold layer aggregates and structures that data specifically to answer high-level business questions.
Oh, I see.
It prepares the data so that when an executive clicks a button on a dashboard to see, say, total European traffic by month, the system doesn't have to calculate that on the fly by scanning millions of rows. It's already pre-calculated and sitting in a highly optimized tabular format that a dashboard can read instantly.
And the performance metrics on this new pipeline are staggering. The case study notes they achieved a 90% reduction in data query time. 90%. And report generation became 10 times faster.
We shouldn't gloss over the human impact of a metric like that, honestly. A 90% reduction in query time completely changes the daily workflow of a marketing team.
How so?
Well, if running a complex report takes 20 minutes, an analyst is going to run it once, go get a coffee, and accept whatever the output is because they don't have time to rerun it. If it takes 5 seconds, that same analyst can test 5 different hypotheses, iterate on their questions, and uncover much deeper strategic insights. It fosters a culture of curiosity rather than a culture of waiting.
But the ultimate victory here isn't just speed. By routing everything through this Snowflake pipeline, they entirely bypassed GA4's sampling engine. The reporting was finally built on a 100% accurate, complete data set. User counts, engagement rates, content interaction, all of it was finally real.
The distortion was entirely gone. They established complete traceability from the raw user event all the way to the executive dashboard, entirely outside of Google's algorithmic guesswork.
And here's what really stands out to me about this architecture. This 3-tier system, bronze, silver, gold, isn't just a quick fix for their GA4 sampling problem. It's a modular ecosystem built for long-term growth.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's say a year from now, this company wants to integrate their CRM data, or maybe their supply chain metrics. They don't have to rebuild the whole house. They just drop that new raw data into the bronze layer, build a pipe to silver, and it integrates without breaking any of the existing gold layer dashboards that the executives are already relying on.
It is the definition of scalable data architecture. You aren't hardwiring disparate tools together in a fragile web. You're building a centralized, structured nervous system that can accommodate growing data volumes and new data sources without requiring structural rework every 6 months.
Okay, so Ninopol built this lightning-fast pipeline, and the data is perfectly clean. But perfectly clean data is useless if you aren't measuring the right business outcomes.
That's very true.
Which was their next massive hurdle. What good is perfect, unsampled data if a B2B manufacturer doesn't even know what a conversion looks like? We established earlier they don't have an add to cart button.
This was a massive strategic blind spot for the client. Architecture is really only half the battle. If you don't have direct revenue events happening on the website, you have to clearly define what user behavior actually signals buying intent. The client had completely undefined conversion events.
And they were operating internationally, which means they were also dealing with complex consent management rules under frameworks like GDPR.
Which is a serious compliance risk. If you don't have strict formal consent management configured within GA4 before the data even hits your pipeline, you cannot verify the legitimacy of your tracked leads.
Wow, yeah.
You could be analyzing data that you legally shouldn't have collected, which raises massive red flags for enterprise compliance.
So Ninopol had to step out of the purely technical data engineering role and get into the business strategy. They worked with the client to establish a clear B2B conversion framework. In this specific ecosystem, they determined that product brochure downloads and playbook downloads needed to serve as the primary indicators of a lead.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, there is a profound shift that has to happen here. In B2B manufacturing, Content engagement is the conversion.
Right.
Downloading a highly technical 40-page product playbook is a massive signal of intent. That is the digital footprint of a buyer moving down the funnel.
Think about your own metrics for a second. If you're listening to this and you manage a product or a campaign, are you tracking vanity numbers like simple page views? Or have you defined what the actual digital footprints of buyer intent look like in your specific industry? Because before this framework, this client didn't really know.
And once they defined those key actions, the brochures and playbooks Nino Paul formally configured those specific conversion events in GA4. They correctly tagged them, established a necessary consent framework so everything was compliant, and then mapped those tags all the way through the Snowflake pipeline into the gold layer.
So now, the marketing team isn't just looking at a dashboard saying, traffic is up in Germany. They can see this specific technical playbook for our new combine harvester is driving high-intent engagement from our primary distributor network in Germany. That is incredibly actionable intelligence.
It allows you to actually assess the ROI of your content and your digital footprint. You can see exactly which product areas are generating real prospect interest based on compliant, legitimate lead tracking. It bridges the gap between web analytics and real-world sales operations.
So we have clean data, and we are finally tracking the right metrics. The very last step is getting this intel into the hands of the executives and marketers safely. Because previously they were relying on this really inadequate setup using Looker.
Right, because a perfect data pipeline only creates value if stakeholders can actually see and interact with the insights safely.
Right.
When you have complex transformed data coming out of a gold layer in Snowflake, you need a business intelligence suite that can handle that depth, refresh quickly, and present it clearly.
So Ninopool replaced their inadequate Looker setup with a comprehensive suite of Power BI dashboards. They set up daily automated refresh cycles so the data was never stale. They built CEO-level summaries, user behavior analysis, geographic distribution maps, and even specific tracking for old versus new URLs to help with website migrations.
That's a lot of visibility.
It is a massive amount of data being exposed.
But this raises an incredibly important question about enterprise governance. When you suddenly have perfectly accurate, lightning-fast data, everyone in the company wants access to it.
Of course they do.
But you absolutely cannot give everyone the keys to the entire database. If everyone can see everything, you run into data privacy issues, and you also risk overwhelming teams with data that just isn't relevant to their jobs.
Right, which is why Ninopol implemented role-level security, or RLS, across all these Power BI dashboards.
Exactly. Governance is what turns raw data into a reliable corporate asset.
I like to think of it exactly like a corporate hotel keycard system.
Yeah.
When you check in, your card opens your specific room, and it probably opens the gym and the pool.
Yeah.
But it absolutely doesn't let you wander into the penthouse suite, and it doesn't let you into the electrical closet in the basement. Everyone gets exactly the access they need to do their specific jobs without exposing sensitive macro-level data or overwhelming anyone.
That's the perfect analogy. Role-level security ensures that the CEO gets that high-level governed summary view. They see the macro trends without getting bogged down in the weeds.
The marketing team.
The marketing and content teams, they get the granular operational views. They can evaluate underperforming URLs, see exactly where users drop off, and track those specific playbook downloads.
And on the back end, they locked down Snowflake too. Access to the actual data warehouse was restricted to a strict named group of administrators across Ninopol and the client organization. So you can't have a rogue analyst accidentally deleting a critical silver layer table and bringing the whole system down.
It's true enterprise-grade governance. It protects the structural integrity of the data while democratizing the insights. You have a single source of truth, but it's presented through the specific lens that each department needs.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive talking about the danger of a broken compass,
Yeah.
making strategic decisions based on an extrapolated, blurry sample of data that nobody truly trusted.
Right.
Ninopol took that massive strategic liability and engineered a complete transformation. They bypassed the native dashboard, pulled raw data into a BigQuery data lake, built a 3-layer Snowflake pipeline to normalize the nested chaos, and delivered it into governed Power BI dashboards.
They resolved years of data distortion. But beyond the impressive technical achievements, I think a modern analytics stack like this represents a fundamental change to how an organization perceives its own reality.
Oh, absolutely.
When you finally have an unsampled foundation that you inherently trust, you stop wasting time in meetings debating whether the numbers are right, and you start debating the strategy.
You stop arguing over what happened, and you start figuring out what to do next. They finally had absolute certainty.
And they built a system designed to scale effortlessly as their analytics maturity continues to grow.
It's an incredible blueprint for any organization struggling with data trust. And it leaves me with a thought that I want to pass on to you listening right now. Think about the dashboards and the metrics you rely on every single day to do your job. If your organization's primary data dashboard went completely offline tomorrow, would your day-to-day strategy actually change? Or, if you're being really honest with yourself, are you just using your current data to validate the decisions you've already made?
Because if it's the latter, your compass might just be a decoration and you might still be flying blind.
Make sure you're actually navigating. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.